And I come today with a heavy heart. For some people it can be theory, and for some people it can be climate change, because that's what the tar sands are creating. But to me, it's a murder of my Mother Earth. It's the murder of all our Mother Earth. When you poison something and you make it sick, it changes.
And we're rolling. So, what's your name and where are you from?
My name's Jess. I am co-editor of the New Internationalist magazine and a member of the UK Tar Sands network.
And what's brought you to London today?
Today's the opening ceremony of the 2010 Winter Olympics, which is taking place in Canada. And so we've come to Trafalgar Square, where there's a huge screen promoting the Olympics, to hold our own event. We've been holding the Oil-ymics, which is all about the race to extract oil from the tar sands in Canada. We've had the three main UK companies who are active in the tar sands in Canada, Shell, BP and RBS, and they've been racing each other for who can get more oil and who can basically extract the most from the tar sands and do the most damage.
Some might say that all the light, sweet crude in the Middle East is in the hands of terrorists, and it's a very dangerous place to try and get any more oil at, whereas our friends in Canada are white, Caucasian and thoroughly capitalist, very friendly to the West, and it's a perfect way to cope with the peak oil situation that's growing in the 21st century.
Yeah.
What's wrong with getting our own oil out of Canada?
Well, it's the most destructive, carbon-intensive way of producing oil commercially that exists in the world today. So the kind of carbon footprint just of the extraction process of tar sands oil is 3 to 5 times more than drilling in the Middle East, for example. Because it's nothing like oil. It's nothing like crude oil. It's sticky deposits of bitumen that are found in the ground, and they're all mixed up with soil and sand and kind of geological formations. And so in order to turn them into oil, you basically have to synthesize several million years of geology that hasn't happened to it. So you have to either strip mine the stuff out of the ground they have the biggest trucks in the world, and then you have to go through this really, really resource, energy, water intensive process to turn it into crude oil. Or they have what they call in situ mining for the deeper deposits, where they basically superheat millions of litres of water with millions of cubic meters of gas, and then pump it through the ground, and it melts the bitumen out of the ground. But both of these methods destroy the boreal forest, which is a really important carbon source, disrupt the local ecosystem very dramatically, pollute the water, pollute the air, and people live in this area. Indigenous people live all around the areas of tar sands extraction.
But Canada's a signature to the Indigenous Rights Treaty, isn't it?
No, it's one of the only countries that hasn't signed the UN Declaration for the rights of Indigenous people. And the reason for that, I think, is probably the tar sands. Because if they were to enforce rights of Indigenous people, if they were to enforce what's called free, prior and informed consent, which is that an Indigenous community has to know about a project in advance that it's going to happen, they have to be consulted on it, and they have the right to say no. If Canada were to actually abide by those rules, then they wouldn't be able to continue with tar sands extraction, so obviously they're not going to sign.
So Canada's trampling on the rights of its First Nations people,
absolutely,
to put big bucks in the coffers of overseas oil companies.
Exactly, yeah. Around 65% of the oil that is extracted from the tar sands goes straight to the US. So Canada is actually the biggest supplier of oil to the US, which most people don't know. They think it's Venezuela or they think it's Saudi Arabia. It's not, it's Canada. This is part of Obama's energy security plan. When he talks about, less of a reliance on foreign oil, a lot of environmentalists think, great, he means with wind turbines and solar panels. He doesn't. He means oil from the tar sands.
So it turns out that as far as America's oil addiction go, their next door neighbour to the North Canada are their biggest pusher.
Absolutely, and it's all enshrined within NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, that any oil that Canada produces, it has to give no less than a third to the US. You know, it's locked into that in NAFTA.
Don't you just love free and fair trade?
Yeah,
so,
well, it's working pretty well for the oil companies, but it's working really, really badly for the rest of us who, you know, everyone who's downstream from the tar sands, not just the people that live right next to the areas where it's being extracted. There are also massive pipelines being built all the way across North America, all the way up to the Arctic, to pipe natural gas from the Arctic down to the tar sands in order to extract the oil. They use enough natural gas every day in the tar sands to heat 3.2 million Canadian homes. It is a completely insane use of energy, and it's just the plans for expansion are enormous.
I caught on the internet footage from the Canadian Embassy in Copenhagen on December the 14th, when a demonstration led by First Nations Chipewyan women was presenting a basket full of treaties to the Canadian Embassy representative to try and get through to them the fact that most of the world oppose what they're doing. How has international solidarity played a part so far?
It's played an enormous part. What's happened just in the last 6 months really is that Canada's international reputation has been completely trashed because of their involvement in the tar sands, and you know, the knock-on effect of the fact that Canada has like the most destructive fossil fuel project in the world is that they're missing their Kyoto target by an absolute mile, and they're not prepared to sign up for anything binding in the Copenhagen process, and so they've suddenly been outed as one of the world's major climate criminals and one of the biggest obstacles to international progress on cutting carbon emissions. And this is really, really bothering a lot of Canadians. You know, a lot of Canadians are environmentalists. You know, they love their country, they love the wilderness, they're very, very proud of it. They don't want to see it ripped up and destroyed, but, you know, it's been happening almost without a lot of Canadian people's knowledge, and I think all of the international scrutiny that is now, that they're now coming under is making a lot of Canadians think, hang on a minute, this is really embarrassing. We need to do something about it. And, you know, it's all being driven by the right-wing government led by Stephen Harper, who's the current Prime Minister, he's a minority government. He only got in by a whisker last time, and, you know, there could be an election at any point, and I'm hoping very much that all of the bad press that they've been getting around the tar sands will actually encourage enough Canadians to vote and like kick him out and bring someone in who's got sensible energy policy.
As Trevor Bulmer put it, open your eyes, time to wake up, enough is enough is enough is enough! Let's hope our Canadian sisters and brothers think so as well. Some would draw the conclusion from the great cop-out at the COP15 discussions in Copenhagen that the way the world's structured at the moment, divided into capitalist nations whose interests don't align and who cannot cooperate in solving the biggest environmental crisis humanity has ever faced, it might be time to get rid of the big barrier, the national borders and the capitalist economy. Do you think that's a valid conclusion?
Yeah, it's a conclusion that lots of people are drawing, but the question is how now, isn't it? Like, where do we go post-Copenhagen? And I think like the one really good thing that came out of Copenhagen was that all of these social movements who've all been campaigning for climate justice in its various different forms around the world kind of came together for the first time in Copenhagen and had some really, really important discussions, as well as taking action together on the streets. And I think we'll see that Copenhagen will be the birth of a new global movement of grassroots networks kind of acting from the bottom up to take back control, you know, over our climate and over the sources of pollution and the structures that are there that are driving that pollution. So even though everyone talks about Copenhagen as a failure, I think, you know, in some ways we'll look back on it as being a really successful turning point where it became clear that we can't rely on government and industry and these kind of official structures that are in place at the moment to sort out the climate crisis for us. We've got to do it ourselves.
Very good. So in the same way that the Seattle days in '99 protests against the WTO kicked off the
It was the
big
beginning of the end for the WTO.
anti-globalization movement, the combination of folks meeting together in Copenhagen is going to kick off a world climate justice movement that hopefully will maybe sweep the borders and the capitalists out of power and create the kind of sustainable, ecological, global human community that we need.
I hope so.